program with the Keynote. And I want to recognize and briefly introduce Corbin Robertson, who will introduce our keynote speaker, Frank Clemente. And I want to thank Corbin and many others who were generously supportive of this event and made it possible. And I'll give you a very brief biography. But what I understand, this is you're sort of an institution, I believe, in the Houston region. That's how some people. You're not that old. Well, here I'll remember your youth. He also was an All-American linebacker for UT under Darrell Royal, which my husband always reminds me of. See, whoa. And he's a third generation from, as I have just recently understood from Corbin, when his grandfather, perhaps in the 1920s, late 1920s, began in the energy business, perhaps as a wildcatter, as an independent, and all of that. And I think through Corbin's father and also through Corbin's life, a major investor in a variety of energy companies that probably draw upon all the three fossils, right? He's also, as I understand, very, very active and devoted to his community here in Houston. He now serves as principal with Quintana Capital Group and chairman of the Cullen Trust for Higher Education. He's on the boards of American Petroleum Institute, the National Petroleum Council, the Baylor College of Medicine, the Texas Medical Center, and the World Health and Golf Association. But he is it was in 2006 that he was inducted into the Texas Business Hall of Fame. But Corbin, thank you for helping support this important event and for introducing Frank Clemente today.
Kathleen, thank you for that warm introduction. We're honored today to have Frank Clemente speak to us. He recently retired from a very long career as professor, researcher, administrator of social science department at Penn State. Uniquely revered by all his students, in his last lecture, it was attended by 1,800. Now, in the whole experience that I had at the University of Texas, I can't say that the football team attended 1,800 classes. I'm teasing. Dr. Clemente's research specialization into the socio-economic impact of energy policy and how it relates to electrical generation is legendary. He's published over 100 academic papers, articles in media such as the Public Utilities Fortnightly, the Electric Perspectives, World Oil, Nuclear News. He is listed in the social science section of the American Men and Women of Science. He is the primary author of the International Energy Agency's report on the global value of coal. But these academic achievements don't tell his full story. He understands the global value of coal, not merely in the statistics, but in the yearning eyes of the impoverished in China, India, and other developing nations. His research and teaching has been one of great renown, and his personal exposure to abject poverty gives him the unique qualifications to speak on this subject. So many of his ex-students have talked about how he has changed their lives. So as we have the honor of listening to him, we'll listen with open ears as he explains to us how, with open hearts, energy can change the fundamentals of human needs. Frank, we look forward to your visit.
I was trying to wonder who that guy was you were talking about. You know, I have to agree that my students have said I changed their life, but not everyone has said for the better. That was the issue. I'm going to talk over here because it's just easier for me to, I usually give lectures to big classes, so it's easier for me to stand up over here if it's okay with you guys, and I don't want to turn my back to too many people. But I teach a class, or I have taught a class at Penn State called Social Problems of the Future. It was a huge class. It had hundreds of kids in, thousands in some cases. And there was usually a big waiting list, so you had to be a senior until you took the class as a general rule. And the kids got in my class, and they wanted to know what the real world was going to be like when they graduated. And they were, since it was called social problems, they thought I'd spend a lot of time on divorce and alcoholism, drugs, and so forth. And I do. But I spent a lot of time, and I still lecture a lot on energy. Because I think energy is one of the most important issues their generation is going to have to face. Where are they going to get the kind of energy, the amount of energy they need to run this kind of society in which they want to live, and will they be able to afford it? But as easy as that is to say, it's not that easy to educate these kids. Because they come in with so many preconceived notions. They don't like gas. Coal's even worse. You don't need oil because you can drive electric cars. When you ask the kid, where does the electricity come from? The first thing they do is look at the electric switch that's on the wall, okay? And they think you can power Pittsburgh with a windmill, okay? And you can't blame them. That's what they hear, and that's what they see. They see the signs, and they read the articles. When I was leaving State College to come down here, I glanced at our local paper. The title, and this is a university community now, the title of the lead article was, in 10 years, Los Angeles will get all of its electric power from a wind farm up in Wyoming, 1,300 miles away. Not too long ago, a guy from the physics department wrote an article, an editorial in the paper. A guy, as a faculty member, a professor, and he said, we don't need fossil fuels anymore. We can get all the energy we need and all the electricity we need directly from the sun using solar power. So when kids hear this kind of stuff, you can't really expect them to be quickly educable, okay? One kid, came into class one day and started getting ready to lecture. A kid said, "Hey, Professor Clemente, what are you going to talk about today?" I said, "Coal." He said, "Coal?" He said, "Do we still use that stuff?" So that's the mindset you're dealing with, and it's kind of hard, and you're always swimming against the tide. But somebody said, I think it was Mark this morning, that the data are there. The facts are there, and the trends are there. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about coal. I'm going to use coal as my example because that's the area I do research in. But, for those that are natural gas people or oil people, you could just plug in your fossil fuel because I guarantee you we're going to need and have to use all of them. There are big trends afoot worldwide that the United States just sometimes doesn't seem to understand what's going on in terms of the scale of the rest of the world. I think, once again, Mark said, well, even if we all rode bicycles, it wouldn't really make much difference because the world's moving on. In Texas, it's a decent place to talk about coal because Texas gets more electricity from coal than any other state. In fact, Texas gets more electricity from coal than New York gets from everything. So coal is a major force here as well. 150 terawatt hours. That's 150 billion kilowatt hours. That's a lot of power. And the argument that I'm making is that the past is really only prologue for fossil fuels. What we've seen, it's not like fossil fuels are reaching the twilight. This is like the end of the beginning. There's a whole new phase developing across the world. A document that I saw a year or two ago, I think fits right into that last panel that you had, and that is the importance of people in the study of the environment. Somehow we lost that. Back in 1972, there was this great paper that could have been written, I think, by this group on the importance of people in the environment. The people are part of the environment too, and people have a right to a quality life and the right to life itself. You don't see that too much anymore. We focus so much on emissions and all these different other variables that are physical in that sense. We forget about people and how precious life is. And one of the greatest reasons we exist and have a modern society is electrification. It was named in the National Academy of Engineering as the greatest contribution of engineering in the last century. Power. It makes a difference. That's what America looked like before we had electricity. And that's what huge parts of the world look like right now. Our GDP was minimal. Life expectancy was 47 years. One of the speakers earlier on the other panel commented on the life expectancy. Women did not go to college, and when they went to college, they went to state teachers' colleges. Electricity was a great emancipator of women. Now about 59% of women go to college. The world's changed. Electricity is the reason we have modern society. Electricity means more people living better, living longer. People who have electricity survive childhood. They live longer. They eat better food. They drink cleaner water. And they learn to read. It begins at the beginning of life as the infant mortality falls off a cliff. And I can personally, we were talking at lunch, I can personally tell you right now how important electricity is. Because we had a baby granddaughter who was born 8 weeks prematurely in Denver, Colorado. She had to be life-flighted. My daughter had to be life-flighted to Denver Hospital from Durango. And that baby was in an incubator for the first 5 weeks of her life. She weighed barely 4 pounds. Without electricity today, she wouldn't have survived. And now she's 12 pounds. And wakes me up. The last time I was there, she woke me up about every 3 hours at night. So electricity makes a difference. Sometimes we're so used to electricity. My students, they really don't get the idea that some societies don't have electricity. They can't even conceive of it because they never had to worry about it. And the basis of electricity is fossil fuels. I mean, oil has another role in transportation and so forth, but gas and coal are the cornerstone of electricity. The one thing we didn't talk about much today was nuclear, though. And I was thinking about that as people were talking, you know. And we sort of gave up on nuclear, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and the problems associated with that. But a lot of people now think we're going to give up on coal as well. But these projections, there's no other way. You're going to have coal. You're going to have gas to produce electric power. These other fuels just aren't going to be able to do it. And you can see that occurring right now. Well, you can see that back in 1970, since that Stockholm Declaration was propagated, the United States has increased its use of coal generation. The world has increased its use of coal. But here goes China. Here goes India, which in 15 years or less than 15 years will have a greater population than China. And here comes other developing Asia, which you never heard about. And these other countries, they start to realize it is about power. It's power, power, power. It's electricity. Now, this is the world we don't want. And the world we talked about earlier today, and certainly in that last panel who was brought up. This is the projected world. This is the world for all the energy we're producing, for all the coal that we're producing, for all the natural gas, this is still the projection for 2030. 1 billion people still with no electricity at all. 2.5 billion people, these are billions, cooking on primitive stoves, wood, dung, biomass. And the implications, we don't have enough, that's all. We need more. We need everything. We saw a picture before the other session on, this is the way 2.5 billion families live. The implications for not only the humans in the room, but also the physical environment. The devastation of crops, the devastation of erosion that occurs, people having to gather wood, women having to travel 7 hours or 7 miles or 6 miles or 5 miles to get wood for the fire. And the vulnerability to assault, to violence, to rape. Girls staying out of school because they have to collect firewood for the family. The vicious cycle. The people that benefit most when electricity comes to an area is women. We saw that from our own experiences in rural America. When electricity came to the farm, the first people to benefit were women. Now, we've seen this kind of picture a lot. This is the reality, though. This is what happens when 20,000 babies die a day. Because in most of them, it could be saved by electricity, as my own granddaughter, as I indicated. Now, to some people, this is just a picture. It's just a photograph, and we see them all the time, and we become kind of inured to these. They're on TV and so forth. But to me, it is a reality. My wife and I have 8 kids, and we had 4 children biologically, and then we adopted 4 from overseas, from places that had no electricity. And when one of our boys came to us, he was able to tell us stories about going to the bathroom in a hole in the ground, having no running water, no electricity, no lights, no refrigeration, cooking on a little charcoal stove like those kids you just saw in the last picture, in a little hut. That was his life. When he joined our family, he was 6 years old, and he weighed 35 pounds. I carried him across Washington National Airport parking lot like he was a baby, because he was. Now, that was over 20 years ago. Today, with the benefits of electricity and fossil fuels and all the life that he could have here, he's a United States Marine. And I'd do him a discredit if I did say he has 2 medals for bravery in combat. And that's really what electricity can do for you. It can change your life. And that's why life is precious. Now, the thing is, we haven't seen anything. There used to be a time when we called the developing world the third world. And it looks like some of you guys were in my graduating class, so you probably remember those days too. And then we shifted to calling it the developing world. But it was always the third world as we grew up. And in 1955, the third world comprised about 68% of the population of the world. By 2000, and now it's about 80% or so. And by 2050, it's going to be 87%. The development's taking place in this world. And that's the world that the EPA doesn't control. This particular increase in population, by 2050, 95% of all the people added to the world will be in the third world. There'll be 2.3 billion people added to this world and 100 million or so to this world. That's where the action is really taking place. Those of you who have been to China, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't been to China, you have to go. Get a ticket as soon as possible. You have to see it. It's beyond your ken, really. It goes beyond mine the first time I was there. And these people will be young. This is the coming wave of rising expectations. They see the kind of things that exist. They want iPads, they want cell phones, they want refrigerators, they want air conditioning, like Mark talked about this morning. They want air conditioning too. Now this does wake my students when they're up, when they realize they're over here, and these countries are over here. This is a wake-up call for young people. So we need everything everywhere all the time. We need more nuclear, we need more oil, we need more hydro, we need more gas, we need more coal production, and of course we need an incredible increase in renewables. We need everything. That's why, when I get these meetings and so forth, and it's coal against gas or gas against nuclear, whatever, I think this just makes no sense. We need everything. We need electricity, we need energy. The world needs energy. We need to get out of the way and let energy producers produce energy. Now, one thing that's happening that we've been studying a lot lately is this rise in urbanization, because that's really the pathway out of poverty for billions of people. The rise of cities. And cities mean longer lives, they mean better health, they mean less poverty. It happened in Europe when people came to the cities, and the cities had to sort themselves out, but eventually the cities became the place where people lived longer, they had better health and so forth. They ate better food. And it happened in the United States in the 1930s, 1920s, when people moved to the city. And it's happening now in Asia as these massive cities are exploding. Shanghai, Beijing, Calcutta, Delhi. So the rise of urbanization is something I think that is one way that people are escaping poverty. And the rise of urbanization is substantial. By 2050, 6.3 billion people will live in cities. So that's a huge, gigantic. So right there you say, well, you don't build cities without power. You don't build cities without steel. You don't make steel without coal at scale. I think this phenomenon in and of itself, we talked about the air conditioning this morning, but this phenomenon in itself, urbanization, that's inherently going to demand huge amounts of energy throughout the world. Because you don't build cities without energy. Electricity consumption, urbanization. It's a pretty straightforward correlation. Now, what's China doing? Well, China's taking people out of poverty using coal. 80% of the electricity that China's generated since 1990, incremental electricity, comes from coal. Coal-based electricity has increased 750%, and poverty's been reduced by 650 million people. It's an economic miracle. Even the IEA says that, and they're not exactly friends of coal. China's just moved forward. Now you say, well, China has air pollution problems, which they do. Now, why do they have air pollution problems? Because people burn coal in their fireplaces, in their furnaces, in their factories, and so forth. China's building centralized power plants and closing down all of these smaller uses of coal. And that's exactly what the United States did in the 1950s, when we moved towards centralized coal power plants and people didn't need coal furnaces anymore. The same thing's happening again. Coal's not really the problem in China, it's a solution. China's building supercritical coal power plants. We're not. India sees what China's doing, so they're using coal as well. They've increased in the last 9 years, in this 9-year period, they increased almost 500 terawatt hours of coal generation, and they've reduced the amount of people that didn't have access to electricity. Now, that doesn't mean they have a lot of electricity. It just means they have some access to it. It might only be for 4 hours a day. It might only be 1 day a week. But at least they have some access to electricity. And that's why in these numbers about people not having enough, getting access to electricity are kind of they're an underestimation, because they really don't give you an idea of what kind of access they have. They may have access for, like I said, on Saturday mornings or something along those lines. They don't have 24-hour access like we do, but they want it. The ASEAN nations, I mentioned them early on. Now, we don't even think of the ASEAN nations as being a big place for demand for electricity. Thailand, Vietnam. Some of you probably were in Vietnam. Singapore. But they'll have 800 million people in 35 years. Twice the population of the United States. That's what I mean when I say these huge trends are afoot around the world. And they're not going to stop. They're going to grow. They're going to increase. And Southern Africa, and Africa itself. The speaker this morning on the comments on Africa, that was just so perfectly true. There's no place on earth that needs electricity more than Africa. They have enough electricity in Africa for a light bulb 3 hours a day per person. That's all they have. I'm not talking about cooking food or anything like that. I'm talking about that's what their scale of their electricity is. 3 hours a day for one light bulb per person. And he talked also about the opposition of the World Bank, opposition to the World Bank loaning money to build coal power plants. And I had an invitation from the World Bank to speak on the importance of these power plants. But the Sierra Club made such a fuss that they rescinded my invitation, the World Bank. First time it ever happened to me. I mean, it was just, kind of a shock. They sent me this email, said, well, given the controversy, we're canceling that presentation. But the power plants, the coal power plants in South Africa, they have increased their electricity, by the way, to a significant number of the population, almost 100%, let's say. But those coal power plants, they provide power to places where the life expectancy is 45 years, where the infant mortality rate is 10 to 15 times higher than that of the United States. I mean, I don't know where we get these moral questions. It's supposed to be the moral issues associated with using fossil fuels. Well, this is morality right here. This is keeping people alive. This is where the Sierra Club and so forth have to be brought to task. What are you doing? You're just killing people. And here, our own country will not lend money or give money so the World Bank can support coal plants. There's something inherently immoral about that. Now, some countries are going in the opposite direction, of course, and they're paying a price. This is Europe, and I know you've heard people talk about this already. This is the United States. This is what Europe pays for electricity, and who knows when it stops, and this is why they have so many people in energy poverty. and what their issues are that are well known, of how many mistakes they've made in terms of their energy situation. This is Australia, which woke up and repealed its carbon tax. But this is what it took them from. Australia has some of the lowest energy prices in the world, electricity prices in the world, and took it to the highest prices in the developed world with a carbon tax. That's Ontario, which I know people have talked about. And coal use went down, family bill went up. So that's what's some of the issues associated with anti-carbon and anti-coal rules, what it means to impact people. Now, U.S. is coming that direction too. We have an escalating number of people in poverty. Since 2008, the number of people in poverty has increased by 20%, 8 million people. We now have 50 million people in poverty. We're getting electricity prices that are higher, and we're getting more people in poverty. That's not a big surprise. Electricity rates have gone up. Number of people in poverty has increased. So how do we get there, and how do we justify this? Well, let's go to the EPA. Now, what does the EPA use as models? Well, if you look at their last report on the carbon rule, I had somebody do a content analysis. They mentioned California 22 times. They mentioned Oregon 7 times and Washington 6 times. Well, California has the highest rates west of the Mississippi. Oregon is hydro. Washington is hydro. But this is what they use as their examples in the EPA document. In New York, which has electric rates that are 56% higher than the rest of the United States. The average state was mentioned 1 time. California was mentioned 22 times. Now look at this variable. Also mentioned in their report. Efficiency or demand slide, in other words, reduction of utilization of electricity was mentioned 339 times. The poor people were mentioned 5 times, economic growth 1 time, poverty was 0, and lower rates or prices 0. This is what I think Kathleen was talking about, the impact on individuals. There's no comment on how individuals, the only way individuals can be impacted according to EPA is through climate change. Impact of higher energy prices, they could care less. And they base it on California. Now, why does California use less electricity anyway? Well, of course, they want to say it's because they have higher efficiency, but there's study after study, and this is only one that I pulled out. There's others that have been published in Public Utility Fortnightly, some at Stanford, one at Berkeley, but only maybe 6 to 24%. Let's give them the credit. That's what all those studies say. 6 to 24% is due to efficiency programs. The rest is due to other characteristics that California has. They have smaller houses. There's more people in the houses. They have high density. It's due to climate. It's due to population trends. It's due to other variables than efficiency programs. Let's look at climate for a minute, because I think that's really interesting. California has 30% fewer cooling degree days than the average state, than the average in the United States. California has fewer cooling degree days than West Virginia does. They don't need air conditioning the way these other states do. That's one reason they use electricity, but they want credit for their efficiency program. California's like the guy that was born on third base and thinks he hit a triple. Now, what have they got? Where does California stand? And this is where I think this is what the model they want. They have the highest rates west of the Mississippi, as I indicated. They're supposed to rise 47% by their own projections. They have 12% of the U.S., but 34% of Americans on welfare. And they have more children in poverty than Nebraska has people. But California is not what you'd actually say should be a good role model. Now, what do I think can be done or should be done? Well, clean coal works. I mean, we may not want to recognize in this country, but other countries are recognizing it. This is Pittsburgh. I know this street well because I used to live right up that street. I know this area well. This was Pittsburgh in the 50s. This is Pittsburgh today. Coal-based generation in the United States, and somebody alluded to this in a previous session, coal-based generation's increased 146% since 1970, and all these emissions have dropped off. Clean coal works. We have to implement it. And it's being implemented around the rest of the world. That's one piece of news. Coal is, somebody mentioned today, early on, coal is being decimated, I think was the word, or something like that. Well, in the United States, to some extent, that's true. It is true. But coal's still the fastest growing fuel in the world. And it's been the fastest growing fuel for the last 20, 25 years. And it will continue to be a fast growing fuel because people need electric power. They need natural gas, and they need oil. And they're going to get it. And they should have it. Now, the future of coal is now, and the U.S. is ceding it away. These supercritical power plants are being built all over the world. 70% of the supercritical power plants that have low emissions and usually has less fuel are being built in Asia. Asia's taking the lead. Remember back in the 70s when we gave up nuclear power? When we had nuclear power, we had the leadership in nuclear power. That's what we're doing today. We're giving that leadership away. There was a time when the United States was the leader in nuclear power. In my own university, we had the nuclear engineering department, which was one of the best in the United States and one of the best in the world. I had a joint appointment in that department for a little while. We had the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was on our faculty. Well, we stopped with nuclear power, and it gradually eroded. And today, we don't even have a nuclear engineering program at Penn State. Well, they have a nuclear engineering program, but we don't have an nuclear engineering department. The nuclear engineering department has now been placed under mechanical. And we have a nuclear reactor. So this is what I see happening around the world. Is the rest of the world's picking up on coal. They're building supercritical coal power plants. There are 1,200 power plants being built or proposed right this minute around the world. But they're not being built in the United States. Just a few, like Turk from AEP and Prairie State, they're supercritical plants, but we only have like 13. And the rest of the world has the power plants. They're building the supercritical plants, and that's what's happening right now. And supercritical power plants are really the means to getting to carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Enhanced oil recovery, which you know so well in Texas here. Because Texas has been the leader with Oklahoma in enhanced oil recovery. And those coal power plants, the pathway to carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which can release, say, 87 billion barrels of oil that's stranded, are coal power plants, because that's where the CO2 is. If you don't have CO2, you're not going to have enhanced oil recovery for the most part. And this is an idea we have to get more emphasis on. Carbon's a product, not a problem. It's an opportunity. And yes, you talked about this at length, I know, in these sessions. So where does it all go right down to? Well, to me, it's that other countries are moving ahead. This is green gen in China. Advanced coal generation power plants. Most efficient power plant in the world is in Shanghai. They're taking the lead. And we're falling behind. That's what's happening with coal. No question about it. And I end with something I think all of us believe. That's one reason you're here. We have the power to make sure nobody really has to live in poverty. We have plenty of energy. It is a bottomless well. Thank you.
All right, thank you again. One more round of applause, please, for our outstanding presenters.
Thank you.
And for all the people, the fine minds and the fine intellects that we've had here with us in the past 48 hours, really extraordinary. Kathleen is going to, I guess we're going to do a quick Q&A, is that right? And then wrap it up. So a couple of things, and she's graciously allowing me to break in. Brooke Rollins just called, which for in our world means stop work and pay attention. But she wanted to make sure that we specifically thanked a handful of individuals who played an outsized role in making the past 2 days happen and in starting what is going to be a movement for change in America and hopefully in the world as well. And so I want to specifically recognize, again, from Brooke, Jim Henry. First of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate all the work that you've done. Our tremendous board members, Ernest Angelo, so grateful that you're here, Wendy Grimes, Kyle Stallings. So again, thank you all very much for everything you've done. And most especially, a leader of tremendous vision in the industry and in policy, Mr. Bud Brigham. So again, I'm not sure where you are. There you are, sir. Thank you very much. And again, that's it. So after this, we're going to have about an hour of coffee and book signings and discussion, and so I hope you all stay for that. But the formal program is nearly at its end. So again, thank you all for coming, and a round of applause for you as well. So thanks. Kathleen?
Well, it's 50 people. So
It's hard to
about,
know what one can
18%.
say after the amount of words that have been said over the last 2 days. I would just ask everyone to kind of reflect on what this crossroads is. And most important thing about that at this point is, as Josh Trevino originally said, what direction one goes. And we really we think Texas is a perfect place to really think big about how you design a very effective, multi-pronged strategic initiative to continue this. All the richness of what we heard in the last few days that I'd call truth and fact and creative, provocative ideas, you really don't, this is not what you'd call common fare in the mainstream media. And we, through all kinds of different expertise, we really want to figure out a way to change this debate, because the terms of the many remarks you heard here and what was their content, their facts and figures and values and morals are not a part of the current debate. The current debate has put us on the defensive, whereas we occupy the high moral ground on this debate. The debate often is explained by the other side is, are we going to save the planet, or are you going to destroy the planet? Where is mankind in that? Because it seems like as we end as we began with Dr. Clemente's remarks, the human individual, real human need is what we're talking about, and the unbelievable transformation that energy adds to human life and amplifies it. I'd like to reflect on my favorite thing to think about of all the ways in which energy transformed life. The gift of time. The gift of time. And the source of that is not one of the the most complicated aspects of the value of energy, but what mechanization does, the difference in lives lived, whether they're affluent lives or subsistent lives, with all the time saving that we have, the mobility we have. The gift of time is the gift of life. It's the gift of choice. And we all know that there's plenty of nations in the world endowed with energy resources that rival ours in this, but owned or developed or distributed under polities which do not confer property rights, economic freedom, the rule of law. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We have I don't know, you check what the average lifespan for a male in Russia is right now. I think it's maybe below 50 or something. Someone here may know, but that's a glaring example. So this is the beginning, as we say over and over again, and to change the debate and to not hang back, to engage, to get more people to engage, to seek support, to be able to do, elaborate media strategic things. But thank you so much for being here. As all these materials that you've had firsthand, as has been said before, will be available on the internet. And we look for your ideas, by the way. Please send them to us. And just last, and most importantly, so many people on the TPPF staff worked on this. I worked there 7 years. I've never known a project where there were so many different parts of the office working, not once in a while, but on and on and on, with Brooke Rollins with the most creative, demanding pushes every step of the way. But I'd like to at least stand for TPPF staff and the IEM management company which put this on. I'd like all those people to stand up, and I thank them personally a great deal, and I ask for all of your appreciation as well.